Thank you for joining the September 2016 edition of the Sustainable Materials Management Web Academy. We are happy to have you participating. This 90-minute webinar is hosted by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to provide training and a networking opportunity to state, local governments, non-governmental organizations, and other stakeholders interested in EPA's Food Too Good to Waste toolkit and working with communities to waste less food. Today's EPA-hosted webinar will focus on source reduction, the top tier of the food recovery hierarchy. Currently, over 30% of the available food at the retail and consumer levels go uneaten in the United States. And when wholesome, edible food ends up in a landfill, all those embedded resources, along with the money spent on them, also get wasted. The impacts, the environment, our community, and the bottom line. The Food Too Good to Waste toolkit was designed and developed for local governments and other community partners to help prevent wasted food in households. During this webinar, Ashley Zanoli, who is currently on detail from our EPA Region 10 office to the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, will present the results from an evaluation report on several campaign implementations. The next three presenters are from three of those communities who successfully implemented this toolkit, including Karen May from King County, Washington Department of Natural Resources and Parks, Jen Jordan from the City of Iowa, and Antonia Bryson from the Rhode Island Food Policy Council. Each speaker will pause to answer one or two burning questions, so please type your questions into the question box. We will also have time at the end of the presentations for additional questions. Please feel free to type questions throughout the webinar. Moving into today's webinar, note our disclaimer, and now to our speakers. Our first speaker is Ashley Zanoli, who led the design and the development team for the Food Too Good to Waste toolkit. Ashley will introduce today's topic and set the stage for us. Thanks for getting us started, and let's go, Ashley.
Thanks, Chris. It's a pleasure and privilege to present to you all today about a project that grew from a brainchild in 2010 into a national toolkit that's helped local governments and households save money by tackling the most elusive and yet most environmentally beneficial part of EPA's food recovery hierarchy, source reduction, which is commonly referred to as waste prevention. And a special thanks to EPA's leadership for supporting the unprecedented work I'll share with you today, and to the webinar organizers for all their work to put together this webinar series. So here's a list of what I plan to cover. I'm going to first share the big picture on why transitioning from a solid waste to a materials management mindset matters, and why limited framing results in limited solutions. Then I'll make a case for why wasted food from households deserves our attention, and after we're all on the same page, I'll discuss the EPA toolkit known as Food Too Good to Waste, and how that can help governments, nonprofits, schools, and consumer-facing businesses partner to untap significant economic, social, and environmental benefits in our communities. I'll also share some of the lessons learned, research gaps, and suggested next steps that were published in that evaluation Chris mentioned. After my presentation, you'll hear from some of the community implementers themselves who have blazed new trails for others to follow. So this life cycle diagram illustrates why mindset matters. Sustainable materials management refers to minimizing the impacts and maximizing the value of products, materials, and food across the full life cycle, from production through disposal, consumption, use, and disposal, or recycling and reuse. And since fall is upon us, let's use a hothouse tomato as an example. The life cycle impacts include the fertilizer, water, energy, and heating equipment and fuel required to nourish and grow the tomato in a greenhouse, and other impacts incurred through harvest and packing, so long as that tomato meets aesthetic standards, of course. And then the energy and fuel required to store and transport and ripen the tomato before distribution to markets, followed up by the impacts to the retail environment and home use. Once the tomato makes it home, it's kind of like a choose-your-own-adventure experience. In 2014, the USDA estimated that nearly 1 in 3 tomatoes went uneaten. However, most of the life cycle impacts I mentioned, and the supply chain impacts in general, are largely out of sight and out of mind. And as a materials management mindset considers more than what to do with that tomato when it's past its prime. It focuses on data-driven approaches and innovative solutions to minimizing impacts across the full life cycle, including consumption, use, and disposal, or ideally recovery, which are still important parts of the system. On the other hand, the solid waste mindset is about recovering as much value as possible from something in that end-of-life phase you see here. And in the case of the tomato, there's little room to prioritize helping businesses and consumers find more meaningful ways to keep the tomato from getting tossed. And this is because the measures of success and public benefit are routinely about diverting as much material as possible from landfills for beneficial use, and not also about reducing the amount of waste generated in the first place. The solid waste legacy started well before we know what we now know about the life cycle impacts of products and food. A 2009 EPA report estimated that 42% of all domestic greenhouse gas emissions come from the life cycle provision of goods, aka stuff, and food. And while we can't control what the world will look like in 50 years, our decisions, our investments, and our measures of success over the next few years will to a large degree determine how wasted food will be addressed moving forward. So what kind of momentum do you want to help create? What if the focus of governments, academic institutions, and entrepreneurs was more balanced between solid waste recovery and efforts to drive more sustainable patterns of consumption? So that with the case of food as an example, we can waste less, feed people, without the need to convert new lands into cultivation for the production of food. So there's a lot of untapped opportunity, and we can maximize on our existing systems. But it's often overlooked when a materials management mindset is only expressed in rhetoric as opposed to prioritized action. And here you can see why framing also matters. So the idea of framing is that choices in part depend on the way in which problems are stated. To date, the issue of wasted food has to a large degree been portrayed as a landfill and landfill methane problem. So it makes sense that most solutions have been developed through a solid waste lens. And here you see a real untouched outreach flyer from a very well-intentioned waste hauling company that's helped many communities improve their recycling and composting programs. However, is this really the message we want to be sending to the public or to food-generating businesses? That it's okay to waste wholesome edible food so long as you throw it in a food scrap recycling bin instead of the trash. Personally, this flyer looks a lot more like what I would like to find in my grocery bag instead of my food waste bin. So if we care about generating more revenue for our local food system, combating climate change, and conserving water, which is becoming an increasingly precious resource, then it's important to realize that all solutions to address wasted food are not created equally. And telling people or businesses that the best thing they can do with food that could have been eaten is to compost or anaerobically digest it is far from the best economic, environmental, or social solution, although it can be a really great solution for inedible food waste. It's like energy conservation, where the greenest kilowatt hour is the one you don't use. So how about if instead the message was that the best thing you can do with food is to eat it or to share it and then compost whatever's left? And you'll hear more about this message opportunity from our panelists today. And here you can see the reason why there are weak and strong sustainability solutions to addressing wasted food. Because food scraps and the uneaten food we see are really just the tip of the iceberg. The true cost of waste is 8 to 10 times the cost of disposal due to all of the energy and resources needed across the full cycle, like we went through in the case of the tomato. And the cost of food lies in what consumers don't see, because wasted food and its consequences are largely hidden to the public compared to the visible cost of disposal and packaging. And we can use this reality to our collective advantage as we elevate the conversation, because humans hate waste, and nobody likes to waste, especially something as revered and nourishing as our food. Which brings us to why wasted food from households matter. So in 1 month, the average family of 4 wastes nearly a quarter of all food purchased. And most of us don't even realize we're wasting food. 73% of respondents in a 2015 National Food Waste Awareness Survey from Johns Hopkins thought that they wasted less food than the average American family. So not only is wasting food a waste of money, but it's also a waste of resources and nutrients. And while EPA doesn't have estimates of consumer food waste compared to other portions of the supply chain, there was a recent REFED report, which stands for Rethinking Food Waste Through Economics and Data, and we have a bit of a better idea about how much food waste is occurring at the household level. Through this REFED report, consultants analyzed the best available data across the food supply chain, and it's worth noting that there are many data gaps in disparate data sets, so this is only an estimate, but they estimated that about 43% of all food wasted comes from households. And like the photo, the bulk of what went uneaten was perishable. So why do lots of people with good intentions and limited budgets waste food? While additional research is needed to better understand this phenomenon, Karen May will cover most of the popular reasons that lead to food going uneaten. And feel free to refer to this slide for some visual reminders on some common reasons food often goes to waste. And just as I mentioned, over 40% of all uneaten food is likely occurring in households. The rest is happening across that life cycle I showed you. USDA also estimates that the average family of 4 spends about $1,600 a year on food that's ultimately never eaten, all at a time when 1 in 7 people are food insecure. So since materials management matters and wasted food at the household level is having unintended economic, social, and environmental consequences, it turns out we all have a role to play because our food is too good to waste. It also turns out that the key consumer behaviors are nothing new. On the left is a poster from World War I. So by making small shifts in how we shop, prepare, and store our food, we can toss less, eat well, simplify our lives, save money, and teach our children good, healthy habits. And this is why measurable social marketing campaigns are a great way to address wasted food and reestablish these triple bottom line habits. So while I won't have time to cover community-based social marketing in detail, what I can tell you is that these key waste prevention behaviors from World War I aren't all that different than the behaviors highlighted in EPA's toolkit known as Food Too Good to Waste. EPA's Pacific Northwest office recently released an evaluation of this toolkit, which was tested in 10 different states in campaigns that ran from October 2012 through December of 2014. The campaigns focused on assisting households in making the small shifts I just discussed, and they were found to be a good way to support waste prevention in communities and to also engage businesses. The collaborative design process started in 2011, and it's worth noting that participating households and local governments found the resulting campaign to be easy to implement through these community-based social marketing principles, which are used to drive measurable behavior change in communities. In short, community-based social marketing, or changing behaviors for good, is a process that uses marketing principles and techniques to influence a target audience behavior that will benefit society as well as the individual. And this is done through tools and outreach methods grounded in behavioral science and proven projects by minimizing the barriers to adopt targeted behavior while enhancing the perceived benefits. The resulting toolkit has since become a national EPA tool and a precursor to the National Ad Council and Natural Resource Defense Council campaign known as Save the Food, which you may have seen recently. The collaborative design process that built capacity for local governments to support waste prevention at the household levels resulted from this campaign. And this collaborative process wasn't fast or easy, but it was worth it. And the toolkit was designed with, not for, local governments or community groups. I also worked within EPA to actively engage relevant industry associations whose members could increase brand loyalty by helping their customers stretch their food budgets further. And like I mentioned, we won't go into community-based social marketing in much detail, but I hope you've learned enough through the webinar to pique your interest in learning more, or better yet, to incorporate social marketing, i.e. marketing for greater social good, into the next program you design or implement in your business or community. And here are some web resources where you can learn more, and Teresa will share that link with you. Here you can see some of the barriers and benefits. Barriers and benefits research is a basic tenet of social marketing program design. You really need to ask your target audience about their barriers and benefits. That old adage about assuming holds true here too. According to focus group results, the strongest benefit was to get value out of what one already has. This is a behavioral science concept known as waste or loss aversion, because no one likes wasting something that could have been used. It often leads to a sense of guilt or remorse, which is why people feel good about wasting less. Cost savings showed up as well as health benefits. As for barriers, automatic barriers related to good intentions being tied to bad consequences showed up, like being a good nurturer by making way more than enough food, or by tossing food before the date label instead of tracking what's fresh or spoiled, or by being a foodie who tries many unique meals in a week instead of maximizing every adventure by maybe reinventing leftovers. Dynamic lifestyle showed up for millennials who maybe unexpected happy hours, brush aside meal plans. Time and convenience barriers showed up for busy parents who want to cook healthy meals, and lack of knowledge and skills in how to maximize freshness and efficiently prep food showed up across the board. People often think they're only motivated by cost, but when you have a deeper conversation, really rich motivators and barriers show up too. And here are the toolkit basics. These have been adopted by communities that you'll hear from today, and the assets in this customizable toolkit were designed to help prevent household waste. They include a message map, an implementation guide, some outreach and behavior change tools. to help organizations either launch new food waste prevention challenges or to incorporate this campaign into existing programs, which can range from composting or other nutrient recovery solutions to community education, including cooking and healthy eating curriculums, to food safety or professional and parents groups. The list seems endless, and food purveyors and other businesses may also be interested in assisting with outreach or providing incentives. And because the design process began with the end in mind, it allowed communities around the U.S. to plant a seed and watch it grow. And using the toolkit doesn't involve going into anyone's homes, which some of you might be thinking. But the point is that social marketing provides us with powerful behavior change tools, and how the toolkit is used and implemented is paramount to the success of the effort. And here are some of the takeaways there. Campaigns should be designed to engage in social and local contexts. One size does not fit all, and it's important to meet people where they're at. Also, engaging at the community level is critical. This is where big advertising and outreach campaigns often fail. Personal recruitment is more time-consuming, but it's also the most effective. And here you can see my former director at a farmer's market making a public commitment to waste less food at home. Social marketing is not social media, but social media can be a tool, particularly in building a conversation around less visible behaviors that are often automatic in our homes. Also, leveraging existing networks of public and private sector organizations to build capacity and provide constant reminders are really helpful. It usually takes seeing something at least 7 times to really sink in, and there's a lot of common ground that is barely or rarely explored. And then finally, contextualizing behaviors and outreach is really powerful. For example, the storage guide on a fridge can help overcome knowledge barriers, or a prompt inside your fridge on a shelf can serve as a reminder to eat first what's almost past its prime. And none of this would have been possible without our pilot partners and implementing partners. It was found through these partners that implemented the toolkit that personal recruitment was more effective than email, that tools tied to specific behaviors were the most effective, and that measurement is key. Household awareness makes a big difference in driving lasting action and rethinking automatic behaviors. The evaluation Chris mentioned includes pilots that were supported by EPA in some way, through a small amount of funding perhaps. And although there were many projects that were done without EPA support through local food policy councils, churches, cities, and community groups, they benefited from learning from these early adopters and learning from each other. Working with the planning team and other implementing partners has been the most rewarding part of my career, and learning through peers and mentoring are very powerful. And here are some of the major findings. I encourage you to read the evaluation of the 17 pilots that were conducted in communities around the U.S. We have Vicki Sontag, the lead researcher, on the line today to help answer any questions. And overall, the toolkit and collaborative design and implementation process have provided opportunities to build upon what's been done in other communities. They've created partnerships to leverage and build capacity for more mindful management of our essential resources. They've helped elevate the connection between individual action and environmental outcomes, and it's been a relatively easy way to take impactful action while making invisible norms more top of mind. It's also been a good way to engage businesses who want to help their customers waste less and stretch their budgets further. So based on the Food to Good to Waste challenge, including household measurement and key strategies and tools you'll learn about more from our panelists, we found that 93% of all participants said they were now more aware of food going to waste in their households, and 55% of them strongly agreed with that case. And 96% of participants said they're likely to continue to use the strategy and tools, indicating there are no ongoing significant barriers associated with the messaging and tools, which were actually developed on a shoestring budget. So in summary, there are strong indications that households have a significant interest in reducing their wasted food at home. Food to Good to Waste behavior changes are relatively easy for households to make, and creating awareness was key to motivating and sustaining their behaviors. And we found that it's possible for households to reduce preventable wasted food by up to 50% or more, or half a pound per person per week by weight. And here are some opportunities to get involved in your community. Government programs can integrate wasted food prevention into their solid waste management programs like composting, their climate change response and food programs. They can also leverage the Natural Resource Defense Council's Ad Council campaign that I mentioned on wasting less food at home. Schools may wish to integrate information on wasted food prevention into their plate waste and community garden efforts. You'll hear from Karen May about ways kids can educate their parents. And there are also a lot of colleges and universities that are part of EPA's Food Recovery Challenge that can use this tool to support sustainability programs aimed at young adults. Civic and community groups and nonprofits may have members in the target audience, which includes families with young children and working millennials who are interested in related issues. And these organizations are able to do outreach through their social networks. And let's not forget about faith-based organizations. EPA actually adapted this tool for faith-based organizations through what's known as the Food Stewards Toolkit. And last but not least, grocers, restaurants, and other businesses can assist with outreach and provide incentives at farmers markets through community-supported agriculture, and municipal waste partners are also likely partners. Really endless. And here's another opportunity that folks can take advantage of, and that's the new NRDC and Ad Council campaign. The link to the social media toolkit's here, and I just think it's worth noting that there's often a misperception that awareness alone drives behavior change. Awareness is an important ingredient, and leveraging the free media attention from this Ad Council campaign is a great opportunity, and it complements the Food Too Good to Waste toolkit to create a really strong recipe for success in any interested communities. And before I end, I just wanted to summarize some of my lessons learned. I put this together before I took on a temporary assignment in the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, where I'm helping a team develop a statewide strategy to prevent wasted food, which will include a statewide strategy that local governments might choose to implement to help households waste less. I'm also working on a new baseline study that could be easily replicated by other cities or states to better understand what edible food is being wasted, how much of that food could have been eaten, and what are the structural and psychological reasons for why that food was wasted in the first place. This list of lessons learned is based on my experience leading that collaborative development, implementation, and evaluation of the toolkit we just shared. And because change isn't easy or sexy and our systems are often designed to reinforce the status quo, change like this really requires tirelessly persistent champions. And like me, the panelists who you'll hear from today have been tirelessly persistent in their communities, and their commitment to social marketing, waste prevention, and more effective food systems will become apparent to you too. They're also committed to learning and growing as new information becomes available and applied research needs advance, so we're better suited to lead an emerging future. Becoming entrenched as an expert often leaves little room for evolving solutions, at least in my experience, and it can result in egos that are more important than outcomes. And in the state of our world, we really don't have time for that. Resource conservation and more sustainable patterns of consumption are possible, but it will require checking unchecked assumptions and a commitment to longer terms on investment that can foster a new status quo, one that works for people, the economy, and our planet. So hopefully my remarks today can help you inspire more holistic programs to preventing wasted foods at homes and outside of homes. Not just about recovering wasted food through compost and other systems. And in closing, I would just like to remind everyone that collaborative approaches to design programs with, not for, end users are not only more effective, but they're also a lot of fun. So thanks for your time, and I'll turn it back over to you, Chris.
Great. Thank you so much, Ashley, and it's been a pleasure to work with you on this project. So Ashley set the stage for us, and now we will get into the three examples that we have to share. First up, we will turn the presentation over to Karen May. Karen is from the Solid Waste Division in King County's Department of Natural Resources and Parks. And for the past 4 years, Karen has led the King County's Food Too Good to Waste campaign to raise awareness about the impacts of food waste and to encourage her residents to adopt behaviors that prevent wasted food. Karen is really a leader in this, using this toolkit, and I look forward to hearing your presentation, Karen. It's up to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
Good.
here, and I'm wondering, does everyone see my slides okay? I'm just wondering if you're seeing the GoToWebinar.
Nope, we're seeing the first slide.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thanks for the opportunity to share King County, Washington's Food Too Good to Waste program. And
I lost the slides. Did you know the slides? Oh, they're back. Okay.
Okay, great.
I'm sorry, Karen.
So that's all right. Thanks for the opportunity to share our program with you. I work with King County, Washington. We're located in Seattle, and we're happy to share our program highlights and lessons learned. And I want to set the stage by talking about, let's see if I can, the slide is not advancing for some reason. There we go. Okay, so I want to set the stage by talking about the impetus for our focus on food waste prevention here at the county. And for us, climate change is a really strong policy driver motivating us to address food waste. We have developed a climate action plan to reduce countywide greenhouse gas emissions by at least 80% by the year 2050. And the pie chart that you see here is from our consumption-based inventory, which tells us that in King County, the greenhouse gas emissions resulting from food consumption from farm to plate are second only to the emissions from personal transportation. So that's huge. We've encouraged backyard composting and worm bins in the past. We have yard waste collection and most recently food scrap collection at the curb. We have those programs in place, and for us then food waste prevention became the next logical area for us to address to make an impact on our climate goals. So the King County Solid Waste Division actually owns and operates the Cedar Hills Regional Landfill, and we accept waste from all of King County outside of the city of Seattle. They have their own separate system. Our waste characterization studies indicate that 33% of what goes into our landfill from King County households is food waste. That's roughly 390 pounds per household per year. So in addition to climate change, we're interested in keeping food out of the landfill because we want to extend the useful life of the landfill and because any wasted organics are really a resource. Internal support for a food waste prevention program for us was very easy. It was identified as a high priority in our comprehensive solid waste management plan, and of course also the climate change goals that I mentioned previously. Funding support comes from our landfill and transfer station tip fees, as we are a revenue producing agency, so that is a huge help for us to really get some robust programs in place. We're really fortunate to have benefited from EPA's initiation of the Food Too Good to Waste program efforts. Through research and collaboration with a number of municipalities, including King County, effective strategies and tools were developed to help residents reduce wasteful household food habits. And the Food Too Good to Waste toolkit and the research behind it really served as springboards for us to implement our own program, which saved us a lot of time and funds compared to developing a program from scratch. As a result, King County was one of the first partners to launch a Food Too Good to Waste pilot program. We are very appreciative of EPA's efforts and orchestration. So why do we waste food? Well, I'm betting that most of you can relate to one, if not all, of these factors here. If we look at overbuying, it's really easy, especially if you're hungry when you go to the store, to buy more than you really need for the week, for example. Overserving is also another factor. It's just really easy to put more on your plate than you think you're than you actually will eat. So that results in plate waste, and forgotten leftovers are one that I bet everybody can relate to. Sooner or later, you might have some leftover lasagna or something like that that ends up becoming a science experiment when it's pushed to the back of your refrigerator and forgotten about. And then confusion about use by and sell by product dates is a really huge factor as well. I'll say a little bit more about that in a little bit. So these actually align with the National Save the Food campaign that was recently launched by the Ad Council in partnership with the NRDC that Ashley mentioned a little earlier. So key strategies to reduce food waste. EPA research identified key strategies to address during the toolkit development, and we use these as a springboard to help develop our messaging, our outreach materials and our program's website. One is make a shopping list and plan your meals. It's just so much more efficient in terms of preventing waste and saving money if you go to the store with a shopping list in hand. The second is keep fruits and vegetables fresh. That's really key because fruits and vegetables are a huge component of what typically gets wasted. Buy just what you need. Don't end up getting so much more fresh produce than you need than that you become that you end up with a bunch of slimy lettuce in your produce drawer. Prepare what you get when you come home and eat it later. And I find for my own self, if I prepare food, for example, washing my lettuce or my kale and getting it ready to go, not only is it easier when I want it because it has been already taken care of, but it also helps you to keep it top of mind. Oh yes, I do have kale in the refrigerator, so let's not forget about that. And then last but not least, eat what you buy. And one factor, one strategy that fits in here is if you don't find that you're eating all of the food that you prepared, a lot of things are freezable. So remember that the freezer is your friend. So we started in 2012 with a pilot because the EPA research had indicated that families with young children were a strong target audience to approach. We did that by working with some fourth grade students in a local grade school, and we wound up working with 15 families that measured and tracked food waste. And along the way, they learned new strategies over a 6-week period so that they could see how much they might be able to prevent by learning these new tips and strategies. Overall, we found there was a 28% reduction in food waste at the end of the pilot, and it was really helpful to hear from the people who participated in the pilot because so many of them said, gee, you know, this really helped us become more aware of what we were wasting, and it was really beneficial to have that feedback. So for King County's campaign highlights, I'm going to start by referring to some online videos that we produced, and we have 3 of them on our website, which is recyclefood.com. And this is one of many tools that we developed, and over the next few slides you're going to see how our program expanded and evolved through the years. So in partnership with a local natural market chain called PCC, and with their in-store chef, we created 3 online videos for our website, and they provide tips and strategies for residents to reduce food waste through smart shopping, food storage, and cooking practices. They're all just about 3 or 4 minutes in length, so they're a nice, quick, and easy way to get some information. Respondents, or residents rather, have responded well to videos, and they find that they provide them with a lot of ideas on how to waste less. Suggestions for working with retailers, if any of you are thinking about that. They are often wary of a campaign that promotes buying less, so you want to frame it in a way where they can see the value for them. For example, do they sell products that help people waste less food, like storage containers? Do they have a bulk food section? You can help them promote discounts on those products and promote the offers to the public, and figure out what campaign information could actually help them sell more or be a good community steward. We are very happy to have the Food Too Good to Waste toolkit materials available to us, and so through our initial collaborative efforts with the EPA and other municipalities, we had some good starting points and we tweaked them along the way, but I'm going to start by showing you our initial fruit and vegetable storage guide was almost exactly what the EPA and our team had put together for starters. We have subsequently expanded that into a larger piece to distribute, and we are finding that it's quite popular to be distributing information about how to keep your fruits and vegetables fresh, and you'll hear more about that in a minute. These have all proven to be popular through our outreach venues, and they inspire residents to take action. Another popular piece is we have stickers that say "Eat Soon" on them, and we distribute those through outreach events and encourage people to put them on the end of a shoebox or something like that so that they can corral all the foods in their refrigerator that are seen to go bad so they get used up before they become a science experiment. This one is really popular, and another piece that we created was a shopping list because we find that that really helps a lot of people. So the toolkit helped us to deliver campaign messages and strategies, really practical tools that have been distributed at our events, but we also have them available online, again, at recyclefood.com. Another partnership opportunity is with volunteer programs. We have a master recycler composter volunteer staff that have featured food to good to waste tables at community events, and they really help us to have an in-depth quality conversation about the topic of food waste. Visitors are drawn in with visually appealing displays. For example, we put food from the various market vendors on our table with signs about how to properly store those produce items for maximum freshness. We have our popular giveaway items that I just spoke about, and the picture on the right shows our Apple chalkboard. We find that that's an effective tool for creating social norms. We want to create visible public commitments of continuing behavior to waste less, and we post those on our Recycle More Facebook page. So let's see, what's next here? Food to Good to Waste 4-week challenge. We had a challenge with about 53 people that actually went through and completed the challenge, and we wanted them to measure their food waste volumes, and we had them do that over the course of a month. After the first week of collecting baseline data, we asked them to try new strategies to prevent food waste, and we provided them with weekly emails to keep them informed and engaged, and we also offered weekly prize drawings such as vegetable storage sacks or clear food containers, again to kind of keep the excitement going and keep them moving forward with the challenge. Those who completed the challenge were also entered to win a $50 gift card to a grocery store. Overall, 37% of volume reduction was achieved, and what I'll say on this note is that challenge is a really good exercise, but it does require a fair amount of hand holding. In other words, we had a consultant that was helping us to send out the emails and offering up prizes. If you just ask somebody to take the challenge by giving materials, say at an outreach event, and have them go on their own, it's really not an effective way to make sure they're really going to go forward with it. We were lucky to have a lot of media coverage along the way in the past few years, and we found that everyone loves food. It's a popular topic, and you see food waste impacts and the whole topic of food waste becoming more prominent in the news. People like telling their stories and sharing information, and we find that at our outreach booths. And holiday food is provided an extra boost for us to encourage interest. So holiday time, when so much is typically wasted around Thanksgiving, Christmas, Kwanzaa, whatever event, it's really a good time to seize the moment with some outreach and awareness. In 2015, we continued with our popular farmers market outreach, and we worked with community, CSAs to include we had an expanded fruit and veggie storage guide to put in their produce boxes, and CSAs, community supported agriculture. We encouraged the challenge through local networks, and we also explored the potential for an imperfect produce campaign. In 2016, we continued again with the farmers market outreach because it's a great way to have conversations with people. We held public screenings of the movie Just Eat It, and then would wrap it up rather at the end of the showing to talk a little bit about the topic and engage the audience in some discussion. We've been cross-promoting our Food to Good to Waste program with our other programs, such as our Compost More, Waste Less campaign, and that's basically about curbside collection of food waste and yard waste. And we are just on the edge here of wrapping up some research to prepare for transcreating our outreach materials in Spanish. And we did that by talking to folks at a local grocery store. It's really necessary to cross-promote prevention and composting behaviors to help really set the concept in. And that brings us to the end of my talk for now. Visit recyclefood.com for more information about our campaign, and I can always be contacted and we'll be glad to talk to anyone about it. Thank you.
Hey, Karen, thank you so much for the presentation and for that gracious offer. We do have one question I'd like you to answer before we move forward, and the question was back in kind of the beginning of your presentation, and it just said, what tool did King County use to determine the various components of carbon emissions? The pie chart, I think you mentioned.
I'm wondering if the question is wondering, you know, I didn't work on the climate change study, other than referring to the consumption inventory that we worked on to come up with some data. I can't really say a whole lot more about that, but I would be very happy to put anyone in touch with our climate change folks. You could just go to kingcounty.gov and then look for climate change, but I'd be happy if someone wants to contact me directly to put them in touch with the right person.
Great, we'll make that happen. So now we're going to move forward to our next presentation, and we're going to introduce Jennifer Jordan, who is the recycling coordinator for the City of Iowa City. And in the summer of 2014, Jennifer worked with us, EPA, our colleagues out in the Kansas City office, to pilot Food Too Good to Waste. And in addition, she piloted a residential curbside food waste collection program. So Jen, we welcome you to the stage.
Great, thank you very much. And thank all the speakers before me too. It's a great honor to be working with this group of people on this topic, and hopefully more of you will come on board after hearing some of the great things that everyone's working on here. What's really striking to me, especially listening to Karen talk about what King County has been doing, is there are so many parallels. And I look back at the fact that they were in the first round of pilots and how much we were able to piggyback on what they did. And I'll get to some of this later, but we really did a pretty basic campaign, and it's because they had already done so much of the work. We really didn't even need to modify much. So that ended up working really well for us. So thank you to all the people who went before us doing this work. I'm going to talk a little bit about the background in Iowa City, and I'll talk, let's see if I can, there we go. Okay. So just a little bit of background here. There we go. All right, sorry about that. So Iowa City, or the state of Iowa, has had a yard waste ban in place since the 1980s. So we might have a little bit of a leg up on other communities there, in that there's already a lot of talk about composting. So we've been doing that yard waste composting for many, many years. We did in 2007 in Iowa City start to look at commercial food waste in the compost facility here at the landfill, which serves our entire county. It's about 130,000 people. So the commercial food waste program actually started out with the University of Iowa, which is located here in town, and it was at the request of a group of students who were very insistent that they had done a feasibility study and it had gone really well, and now we should really start doing this, this being collecting food waste from one of the commercial food service facilities on campus, one of the Hillcrest Food Service, and that the feasibility study made sense. We should really start doing this. So the students were very insistent that we do this, and we ended up working on with the university on this pilot, and that's actually what's led to our program. And I won't talk too much more about the commercial, but I will say that 9 years into this program, we now work with about a dozen local entities, commercial entities, and we've been able to divert about 500 tons. We're up to about 500 tons per year of commercial food waste from the landfill that would have otherwise gone in there. So that's a great program started, and I'm very proud of that as a University of Iowa alum, that started out as a student project. Along the way, in that, we definitely included food waste reduction information with the commercial entities, and evolved into to begin talking about residential food waste collection as well. So we were just starting to have these conversations probably in 2012 or so, when the first round of pilots for Food Too Good to Waste were having these conversations, and then we were approached by the EPA in late 2013 to see if the City of Iowa City wanted to pilot the Food Too Good to Waste program. So, and I keep saying we, I worked on this with my intern Jane, who I no longer have, but she did a phenomenal job. This was really her baby, and she did a really good job on this. So if she's listening, thank you, Jane Welch. Okay, so the goals and objectives for our facility were to, or for our program, were to begin to teach Iowa City residents what the larger social and environmental impacts were of food waste. And Ashley and Karen covered those really well, so I won't reiterate any of those. But we really wanted to start having the conversation more broadly in Iowa City to begin to change those social norms. And a lot of that was through community-based social marketing. So I encourage you to check out the webinar that Ashley mentioned as well. I will definitely be doing so. We also wanted to gain experience implementing the Food Too Good to Waste program. And then finally, for us here in Iowa City, we wanted to utilize the opportunity to try curbside organics collection. There had been some talk of it in the community. There is definitely a dedicated group of people who are interested in doing it. So we thought this would be the perfect opportunity to try to roll that out and see how it went. So the actual pilot for us began with contacting about 300 homes in 5 neighborhoods across the community. We really tried to get a good mix of age and income and kind of general a variety of demographics. We did a first round of outreach with letters with self-addressed stamped envelopes, the old school way to return the paper survey. We did yard signs in neighborhoods, and we did door hangers. And this was over the course of about 3 weeks as we tried to reach out to get people involved and interested. Prior to beginning, we had kind of the last ditch effort was to have an open house in each neighborhood. And when you show up in a neighborhood and sit there for 3 hours in a City of Iowa City vehicle, people definitely come out to see what's going on. So we had a table beside the vehicle with information and with the countertop collection, bags and bins, the kitchen scale, the information packet. So those were the things that we handed out to the 52 households who ended up participating across the 300 that we invited. The open house was really nice because we were able to get some face-to-face contact and let the neighborhoods know and the potential participants know that we really were focused on this and we really did want to make this happen. Okay, so the gist of our pilot is that we, over 6 weeks, measured preventable and edible waste. And I have a couple stars here for things that I would do differently, and I'll come back to those at the end. But we did measure the waste together. We did not separate those out, didn't ask people to separate those out. And we also only did a 1-week baseline, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a couple slides as well. So the 1-week baseline was just measuring. Participants were not given strategies at that point. But beginning in week 2 and then through week 6, we gave strategies via the email, which that was part of the collection process in the beginning of getting people's emails. And again, this is where we really benefited from the first round of pilots and the information because most of the stuff was already set up. The emails were really kind of an introduction to the concept and then a link or a PDF that we included. So a lot of that work was already done. We didn't have to go back and make up a bunch of stuff. The wheel had already been invented. So that was really helpful. We also, for those who were on Facebook at the time, we also did Facebook page prompts. We did yard signs 2 to 3 different times for encouragement, and those were really simple. With only having 5 neighborhoods involved, we were able to kind of strategically place stuff so that all people entering the neighborhood could see that, or all participants could see that. And then the other part of the weeks 2 to 6 was the data collection. So a lot of the encouragement, for instance, or the page prompts on Facebook were to remind people to get their weekly weight and to be reading through those strategies that we had given them that week. One of those, and Karen mentioned some of the strategies, and Ashley did a couple as well. One of the ones that worked really well for us, a physical one, were the Eat Me First prompts. And I can tell you with the teenage stepson in the house, he didn't need a lot of prompts to eat what was in the Eat Me First box. Just having it there where he could see it and reach it, it was gone pretty quickly. So that's a really useful tool, probably more than for just teenage boys too. Okay, so then for data collection, for the post-survey, we emailed the same way, kind of the old school self-addressed stamped envelope for a paper survey. We received 27 of those back, which of the 52, I was actually hoping to get a few more than that back, but we did get weight data back from 32 households. And those who returned both sets of data, both the survey and the weight data, were entered to win a gift card from our local co-op, the New Pioneer Co-op, which is a great partner for multiple food waste or food and local food efforts in the community. So we're really appreciative of that. Okay, so on to data. maybe what you're looking for here. So over the course of 6 weeks, and I'll reiterate, we did the 1-week baseline. So you can see in that first week, people were really just starting to get a hang of this. I think by the second week, they really were trying, had figured out what was going on and were able to see, okay, these are the things I need to be weighing. And we had a pretty detailed list of what we wanted them to include in food waste. We have a commercial compost facility, so we can include things such as meat and dairy, which other communities may or may not be able to do given the location of their composter, anaerobic digestion, or that type of thing. But you can see there was actually, over the course of 6 weeks, there was actually a slight increase from 4.71 to 5.22 pounds per week per household of food waste. And I'm going to zip to the next one because this data, if you look at it a little bit differently, the data changes a little bit. So if we average in the first 2 weeks for the baseline, which is what some other pilot communities did, and in retrospect we would have done a little bit differently. If you average those first 2 weeks together, you can actually see a slight decrease in the amount of food waste produced per household. So this is my preferred way of looking at it, but I think it's also a bigger picture. I think this is probably the right way to do it, to do that 2-week baseline, to give people a sense of what really can be collected instead of just throwing them in after the first week. So we did see a slight decrease there, as you can see. Okay, so part of the pilot survey was asking about demographics from participants' households. So you can see we had annual income split out in $20,000 increments, and you can see there's a slight increase in the amount of food wasted with the amount of increasing in income. So that was interesting, and I think that holds relatively well with other data. Given that it's a relatively small data set, I think it holds relatively well with other data from across the country and the other pilots. And perhaps we can come back to that when people have questions about it. Okay, so this is the one that there's the next couple slides here I think are particularly interesting, and I'll point out on the bottom, a reminder, we did not have participants separate out the edible versus preventable food waste. So edible meaning the half a muffin that I couldn't finish for breakfast and threw away, versus the preventable, which might have been the watermelon rind or the banana peel. So this is really interesting to me that we found that people who gardened, households that gardened, had more food waste than those who didn't. And the assumption there is that it's probably more inedible food waste. It's more probably things like peelings and husks and things that they grew in their own garden, and they want the good part of it, not the rind or, for instance, the corn husk in Iowa. So similar with a vegetarian or vegan diet as compared to an omnivorous diet. So this one is pretty striking, as you can see. So again, the assumption is that a household with a vegetarian or vegan member probably has a lot more inedible food waste, and they're probably not necessarily more wasteful, just that they had more peelings in the edible part. So these were particularly interesting to me. Along with that, and looking at Iowa, and this is the same chart that I had in the beginning, but this actually has the weeks along the bottom to make a point about the second jump there, the 5.68 in week 4, 5.68 pounds per household per week. That was actually the week of Independence Day, and we got a lot of feedback from the participants saying that they had a holiday party that week, or they had family over, and that this was not representative. And you could tell people really started to feel strongly about this over time, that they did not want to be seen as wasteful, and that they pointed out that this was inedible. It was a watermelon rind or a sweet corn, a husk, or cob that they couldn't eat. So you could definitely feel a little bit of defensiveness there, that households were adamantly not wasting food, that this was the inedible portion of it. So that was an interesting, probably one of the more interesting things that we saw in the pilot. Okay, so I mentioned just briefly that the city also used this opportunity to pilot curbside collection, and that was actually a really positive part of this. We got some great feedback from residents. We tried a couple different container types, a couple different bag types. So, and I'll come back to this at the end, but that this will be something that the city hopes to move forward with community-wide in the very near future. The key message with this, and Ashley and Karen both touched on this, the key really is to make sure people understand that composting is great. And I can tell you, as a certified compost operator who works at the landfill that serves the entire county, we still get a lot of food waste in. So there's lots of opportunities to divert food waste through composting, but even more importantly is that source reduction and helping people find ways at home through these strategies and through these prompts to not waste as much edible food. So that'll be a big part of what we tie in with the curbside collection if and when we roll that out. Okay, so if your community is thinking about rolling this out, this slide may be of particular interest to you. You can see we have an estimated cost column, an actual cost, the cost per household, and then the source of where the funding came from. So I'm just going to skip ahead to the source here. ICLF is the Iowa City landfill, and the refuse division is within the city of Iowa City too. So the city of Iowa City, with the exception, funded this entire program, with the exception of the new Pioneer gift cards, for which we are very appreciative. But this primarily, as you can see, the primary cost of this program was staff time and printing, education, the outreach, that type of thing. We did spend quite a bit on containers and bags and scales, but those moving forward as we're doing the education and outreach will have some additional incurrence of cost for containers. We won't have the scales, but we definitely will have more staff time, of course, but then also more funding will be allotted for education and the containers and other prompts and bags, that type of thing. So per household, we were looking at, let's see, I'm sorry, I haven't looked at these numbers in a while. As you can see, the staff time is by far the biggest part of it. But per staff or per household, the cost was about $200, but the hard costs were more in the $30, $40 range per household over 6 weeks. So it's a program that has really good feedback from the public, so I think this is definitely worth trying in your community. And I'm happy to share this with anybody if anyone wants more information about where we got the materials, for instance. Okay, so some of the feedback that we got from households was that the strategies were easier, somewhat easy, and that they're definitely more aware now of food going to waste. And again, that most of the food waste was inedible. So again, a little bit of defensiveness there, or at least awareness of the difference between edible and inedible. And I've talked a little bit about the lessons here, that the city, if we were to do this again, we would do a longer baseline and measurement period, and then to make sure to separate out the edible from the preventable food waste, just so we can see if those watermelon rinds really were the reason for the jump that 4th of July party week. All right, and we will be, to touch a little bit on this, we are doing ongoing outreach with lots of different entities in the community, and every time I hear other people talk about this program, I have more great ideas that I'm gleaning from them. So we've been doing, we obviously have our website there. We my intern Jane that I mentioned worked with a bunch of community members to do a wrap, which I have on a YouTube link here. We've done a program at the senior center in the community. We've done food films, and we're planning on doing more this fall. We've done some tabling at the local farmers market, and we're again planning more of that for fall. Probably the most exciting thing is that our department presented to City Council in June of this year not only food waste at the curb, but the food waste reduction efforts and lots of other waste initiatives that I'm really excited to be rolling out over the next couple of years. And City Council gave us resounding support, and we'll be going back to them with formal code changes. Hopefully in the next, I have September here, but hopefully in the next month we'll be going back to council, and then the plan is to roll out this en masse in late this year and early in next year. So the Food Too Good to Waste program gave us a huge push in working towards a lot of these waste reduction goals. I think I mentioned, I'm not sure, so I'll reiterate just in case. We do have, of what's coming into the Iowa City landfill, it is about 15% food waste. So we definitely have an opportunity to not only push the curbside collection of the food waste, but to really work on that reduced piece of it. Okay, so I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jen. We just have one burning question, just a little bit of a clarifying question for you. Is the yard signs, can you explain what they were and how you use them?
Sure, they were really basic, and the city uses yard signs a lot for advertising things such as Party in the Park here in town, or if we have big waste reduction or reuse events. So we kind of copied that idea for the yard waste signs. They were pretty simple. Basically, make sure physically they are an 11.5 by 7, printed on 11.5 by 7 with 2 pieces of the same thing back to back and then laminated. You cut the bottom open and put them over an H-pole, which is basically just a little metal wire frame, and we stuck those around neighborhoods and reminding people to measure their food scraps this week, reminding them to check their email and get the prompts, reminding them to check the Facebook page. So it's really a visual recognition, a reminder as they're either leaving for work or for school in the morning or when they're coming home in the afternoon or evening, that this is still, it's on the radar, pay attention to it. And we change those out. Again, I think either 2 or 3 times we had up different signs throughout the event, the 6-week event.
Great. Thanks for that clarification, Jen.
Thanks.
We are now going to close the webinar with our final panel, which is by Antonia Bryson from the Rhode Island Food Policy Council. And I had the pleasure of working with the Rhode Island Food Policy Council to pilot the Food Too Good to Waste toolkit, and they continue to promote the toolkit with several partners, including several city housing authorities and the Rhode Island Food Bank. Welcome, Antonia.
Thank you very much, Chris, and I'm delighted to be here. So the Rhode Island Food Policy Council is a nonprofit organization, unlike the two presenters that we've heard from. So we have a little bit of a different organization to deal with this. And what I'm showing you on the slide right now is sort of our signature graphic. We were founded in 2011 because the food economy in Rhode Island is actually very vibrant and growing, and there's a tremendous amount of energy in it, both from the farming sector, the restaurant sector, and everything in between. And our nonprofit was founded to sort of take advantage of all that energy and help promote it. So you'll see that in the little circle sort of on the southwest corner of the diagram, we're invested in the entire food system. So all these circles represent the system as a whole, and we kind of see it as a continuous whole. But we're kind of in the southwest corner. We're in resource and recovery, and in that corner we are trying to concentrate both on reduction and on diversion from the landfill, as our other presenters have mentioned. And we wanted to make the system sustainable, and the food waste reduction program certainly fulfills that goal. So as Chris mentioned, a couple of years ago we did a pilot ourselves. And the pilot was run by the man that you see in the picture. He is a chef. We have a very well-regarded culinary school here in the state, and I would mention that the Food Policy Council is a statewide organization. Of course, we're a very small state, but we have a very well-respected culinary school, and the chef helped run the pilot. The pilot was done pretty much on a volunteer basis. There were 40 households. They were divided into 4 groups of 10 based on different demographics. So there were 4 different demographics, and they did what we call a full 6-week program. That's very similar to what you've seen in the earlier presentations. We did a 2-week baseline. We used the EPA tools as they had been designed and presented to us by EPA. So what that meant was we did a 2-week baseline, and then we introduced the 4 strategies that you've heard about, the shopping list, the prepping, the storage guide, and the Eat Meat First. And we introduced those to the participants, and then they went off for 4 weeks and implemented the strategies and continued to measure their food waste. We gave them scales, so we were able to do both weight and volume. They had containers and scales. And the last bullet there really refers to the fact the curriculum being the EPA curriculum. We also did skill development. So what our chef is showing you in the photo there is when we presented the program, we had a cooking demonstration, and we communicated techniques both in terms of how to use knives, how to use cooking skills to prepare your food in both a tastier and a less wasteful way, both in terms of getting the full value of the edible portion. Jen was just talking about the edible portion of the food out, as well as using some parts of the food that you might have otherwise considered to be waste, and you could being shown how you could actually use it in a dish. I think his signature example of that is the stems in kale. So the next slide is going to show you about our pilot, what our results were, and we were very happy with it. We had success. We had a 60% reduction by weight, 26% reduction by volume, and most importantly, we had a very high engagement from the participants and a very positive feedback. So since everybody felt very good about the results of that program, the people in charge at the Food Policy Council raised the question of where do we go from here? Was this a one-time thing with volunteers, or how could we take this to the next level? And at that point, they applied for an EPA grant in the Healthy Communities program, which pretty much brings us to what we're doing today. And the Healthy Communities program allowed us to target some of the partners that you're seeing here on the screen, excuse me, who are what we call our ambassadors. We term them ambassadors. And the way we framed this grant application was in a train the trainers model. So going back to the principles of community-based social marketing, where going out and dealing with your peers and doing it in the community, we structured this grant so that we were working with partners that we knew had roots in the community and also were organized and were able to provide a structure for us. So we chose 3 housing authorities, Pawtucket, Providence, and Newport. Those are all small cities in Rhode Island, and they are existing, they run in existing housing sites, and they provide various programs at those sites, and it's a low-income eligibility situation, so everybody who's living there has met low-income eligibility requirements. We're also working with the Rhode Island Community Food Bank, which is our statewide organization that helps deal with hunger and food insecurity in the state, and I'll be talking about a number of programs that they provide. And in the lower right-hand corner, that stands for African Alliance of Rhode Island. That's an organization that works. We have a fairly significant immigrant population from West Africa, and that's an organization that works with that immigrant population and helps them accommodate themselves to life in Rhode Island. So we got the grant. That was the good news. And we just about a year ago, and the first thing we did was we put the ambassadors, those organizations that were on the last slide, through the 6-week program themselves. So these were all organizations except for the food bank. The food bank is already aware of food and works with food, but the other organizations, although they do have some programs dealing with food, affordability of food, food deserts, that kind of thing for their population, they're not necessarily attuned to it, so it was very new for them both, and they were all very excited in going through the program themselves. We gave them the container that you see on the left. They measured their own food waste. We brought back our chef, you'll see in the lower right-hand corner, to do his demonstration. You've got prep now, eat later on the screen behind him, and he demonstrated his techniques, and we went through the tools. There's a whole slideshow. We use the EPA slideshow, which I'm sure you can get on their website, that tells you that gives you the presentation, which provides the background of the problem and introduces you to the tools, and then we put the ambassadors through it. So, well, I really want to be there. So they did the 4 weeks, and they had pretty good results in terms of the reduction of their own food waste. So the people from the food bank, I would say, actually didn't waste much food to begin with, but were still able to learn something from the tools and reduce the very minimal amount of food that they had, food waste that they had started with. So I think it very much opened up everybody's consciousness to the issues that they were going to be having to deal with their own population. So the structure of what we were doing then sent all these 5 partners off to try to implement the program with their own populations in a way that made sense for them, knowing their populations. And the first thing we did was we took those EPA materials and we really very much branded them with our own color scheme. You might see on this slide where it says customized materials that we're using some of the same colors that you saw on that first slide, which is our signature slide. And in addition to sort of branding them with our format, we tried to reduce the text and redo the text in certain ways that we thought would be more useful to our population. We also translated them into Spanish. So you'll see we had a slightly different orientation and format because of the Spanish lettering, but in particular our Providence Housing Authority site was entirely a Spanish-speaking population, so they needed the materials in Spanish, and now we have them in Spanish for further use. So I'll just give you a little bit of what each, we're in the middle of the program right now. We're just, well, not quite the middle. We're just about to wrap it up, but we're just getting the final results in. But I have some preliminary information here that I'm going to give you. So the food bank, as I said, is an organization that's already deals with all the food pantries in Rhode Island and has educational programs, in particular healthy cooking on a budget. And before I get into that, I also wanted to mention one thing that seemed to be important in thinking about how we're going to sum up this program is who we worked with at each of these organizations. So that's not something we actually prescribed in advance, but I think it's going to be an interesting outcome that we see in terms of who your ambassador is, who in the community might be passionate about this, who might be respected. So at the Community Food Bank, we were working with nutrition educators, and they were all senior staff, so they were very well versed in the concepts of nutrition, and they were very passionate about reducing the food waste. And indeed, quite a few of them had been are graduates of that culinary school that I talked about that we have in the state. So they teach a healthy cooking on a budget course, and they found that the food waste program dovetailed very nicely with that, and they put together, they sort of broke up the program into little segments and introduced different segments. It's an 8-week course, the Healthy Cooking on a Budget course, and they introduced segments of the food waste program throughout the healthy cooking course. And anecdotally, I've learned from them already that it went over very well, and that the students who would take such a course would also be very interested in reducing the amount of waste. They also have a culinary job training program whereby they take low-income individuals who are interested in being trained for the food service sector, and they train them there on site. They have kitchens on site at the Rhode Island Community Food Bank, so that was terrific. They had their own volunteer or paid chefs who come in and teach the program. So everything worked very well in terms of incorporating and having the resources to incorporate the concepts. The African Alliance did a different model. The person that we worked with there was the executive director, so that was useful in terms of his status within the community and his status within the organization. He conducted a general outreach and education strategy. So they have a church where pretty much the entire community attends, and they have something like a coffee hour after the church. They run a community garden. They also run a program for newly arrived refugees, which is not on here, and they have a farmer's market stand. So at each of those locations, he gave introductions to the program. He had a poster made with a very large photo of a full container, and he tried to interest them and gave out containers. He didn't ask them to follow the program more than actually giving out the containers, but he felt that that was the most important thing in order to raise consciousness among the population. And I think when we get the final results from him, one of the themes there, and I think this was mentioned in one of the earlier programs, is since we're dealing with one type of ethnic group here and one sort of general culture, although I think there's diversity within the cultures, he was concerned about translating the cultural context of food waste into his community's norms. The housing authorities that we worked with each had a slightly different approach. There's pictures of each of them here. Newport's on the right, Pawtucket's in the middle, and Providence is on the left. You can see they're all low-rise. In each one of them, we worked with, they have what are called resident services coordinators. So those were people who brought programs to the residents in addition to helping the residents with issues and problems they might have. And there the challenge was what kind of engagement strategy they would use to get people to participate in the program. And each one did something different. One of the authorities had a regular group, a planning council that met regularly, and she used that as the core to introduce the concepts, and then she had them go out and try to get their friends involved. Another housing authority simply used the similar to Iowa City Outreach Program, where she put up flyers and put them under doors and knocked on people's doors. She actually knows the residents, so that could be part of it as well. And the third one, in the third housing authority, there was a once weekly cooking education session similar to the food bank, and she used that to do her outreach. So as I said, we're just about to wrap it up, but and I don't have the final results yet, but in discussions during the course of the program, here are some of the things that might have come up, that did come up. One thing had to do with the tools themselves and whether they actually were a good fit with some of the characteristics of this population. So shopping frequency, in other words, some of this population might not have transportation. They might only shop once a month. They might not have the ability to buy only what they need for the next week at that particular shopping experience. Home storage capabilities. They may have smaller refrigerators. They may have smaller freezers. Cooking skills, I think, is going to come up to be as an issue because there were reports that sometimes the cooking skills are rudimentary of the population. And then motivation would be another category that's worth looking at. Incentives, the Iowa City program talked about that, and I think both programs talked about that, how in order to get the sustained participation, depending on, they were talking about depending on whether you get people to continue to participate over a 2, 3, or 4, or 6-week program. I think we are also going to be talking about how do you get them in the door in the first place, this not being a topic that perhaps the community otherwise knows anything about or might be inclined to immediately show an interest in. The cooking demonstration was very important. We had one of the partners did use Dave for the chef for the cooking demonstration, and that generated a tremendous amount of interest. And then the messaging of reducing food waste and saving dollars at the same time. Again, of course, it being a low-income population, there was probably some desire. It was a powerful message and could possibly have been made even more concrete in some way. The thing I have a photo of in the lower left-hand column, the veggie box, is something that we tried to use as an incentive in 2 of the housing authorities by kind of dovetailing we have a very active farmers market program throughout the state where they don't just run farmers markets, but they have several other programs to try to get fresh produce out to different communities, one of which is they put together a weekly box. It's a subscriber service with the seasonal fruits and vegetables that people can pick up at convenient locations. We use that to try to provide an incentive and also to promote healthy eating at the same time. So a couple of the partners did use that, and in fact one of the partners had the veggie box arrive at the same time the chef was doing the demonstration. So he went through the produce in the box and he demonstrated how you would use each thing that was in there, and then I think they either divided off or raffled off the box. So that was very successful as well. So that's where we are, and I'm here for any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Antonia. Teresa, I'll turn it over to you for questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you all again to all of our speakers. We will start off with a question for Karen May from King County. There was a question about the reduction of food waste by 30%, 37% by volume or weight. So can you explain kind of the difference between volume and weight in your measurement?
Well, for us, we wanted to keep things simple, so we gave each challenge participant some collection bags, and on the front of the bag there was basically a scale, kind of like a ruler almost, to indicate how much of that bag they were filling. And so we went by volume just because it was easier than asking everyone to get a scale. We certainly didn't have the money to provide scales for people, and it was just the simplest way to go to at least get a ballpark idea of how much they were reducing. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you, Karen. And for those to know, some campaigns did decide to buy scales for their participants to use and use that as an incentive, and were able to gather data by weight. But others, like Karen in King County, used a volume method for measurement. So for Jen Jordan at Iowa City, can you explain a little bit more about the edible versus preventable food waste, and for example, how was the watermelon rind preventable?
Sure. Thanks for asking. And I made it inadvertently misled people with the last couple of slides. I may have had the incorrect wording, so sorry about that if that was the case. So preventable and edible food waste are basically things that could have been eaten. So if you think about, I use the example of the watermelon. The interior part's edible, obviously, but the inedible part, so the non-preventable then would be the rind and the seeds. So the difference there is the part that can be eaten versus what can't be eaten. And we really want to encourage people to eat the parts that can be eaten. Interestingly, one of the things that I've learned through this is there are a lot of parts of fruits and vegetables that can be eaten that a lot of Americans in particular don't know about. So other cultures have different ways to use different things. So if that piques your interest, do some research on it and see what parts of fruits and vegetables that are edible that you're not eating at your house.
Great, thanks, Jen. And Ashley or Vicki, do you want to chime in on edible and preventable and using that terminology?
I don't really have much to add, Teresa, on the terminology. I think it's an evolving conversation, and the more consistent we are with our language, I think the greater change we can potentially drive. Vicki, do you have anything to add?
I think what we've been really conscious of is actually the difference between the terminology of food waste and wasted food. And we've been trying to push the idea of talking about wasted food to show that this is a resource that you are actively wasting rather than just something that you're automatically, unconsciously discarding as food waste. That's something that's no longer valuable.
Great, thank you. So this question is for each of you to take a crack at. How does your work to prevent wasted food at the household level align with your organization's goals and priorities? I know some of you went a little bit into it, but how does this work align also with your regional or state goals? Let's start
Jen,
with Karen. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead, Jen. Jen, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So the Iowa Department of Natural Resources has declared food waste as a targeted waste for Iowans to deal with, particularly for landfills to focus on. So there's been a lot of talk about food waste in Iowa for probably 3 to 4, if not 4 years, if not longer. So that ties in really well at the state level, which means there's potential additional funding for programs or initiatives. Also locally, just over the last about 18 months, the City of Iowa City has participated in the STAR rating system. And one of the areas that we realized we could make a lot of headway on would be food waste. So it ties in with a lot of our waste minimization efforts. And the other side of that, and this was alluded to a little bit earlier, the climate change or the greenhouse gas emissions that result from food waste going into the landfill are really significant. So showing that we can keep more food waste out of the landfill, out of the compost facility by reducing that food waste overall, we can see reductions in climate change greenhouse gas as well.
Thanks, Jen. Karen or Anthony?
Yeah, for King County, it's quite similar to what Jennifer just said. We have, I work for the Solid Waste Division in the recycling section, and so we have very solid solid waste management goals, which include reduction. We have zero waste of resources goal, and then of course our climate change goal. So for us, there's just no question that we were going to be focusing on food waste, particularly, or rather I should say waste prevention, because we had already done a lot and continue to promote backyard composting and yard waste and food waste collection, but we wanted to go further upstream, of course, and try to prevent the waste in the first place.
For Rhode Island, it's a couple of ways. First of all, we also have the landfill goal. We're running out of space in the landfill, and organics are a large component. So diversion of organics is one of the key strategies in our solid waste management plan to increase the life of the landfill. The second one is the Food Policy Council itself would much prefer to see as one of its mission statements both the reduction in waste or, if it cannot be reduced, the composting or anaerobic digestion of it so that those resources can be reclaimed. And the last thing might be a little bit unusual. I mentioned that our farming community here is very vibrant. That's part of our food system. We are now trying to increase, in many sectors, the use of local food and local produce, and we're also trying to increase the amount of land available that can be farmed, which is a tough thing. And the idea of using that and doing all that and then having a certain percentage of that food be wasted is really something that we need to fight very hard not to have happen.
All right, and I can answer in Oregon, Teresa. They've made a real fundamental shift from solid waste to materials management, in part through a Senate bill called Senate Bill 263 that passed last summer. And that updated the state's waste prevention and recycling requirements and goals. So despite steady increases in materials recovery, these updates were necessary because high-impact materials are still being thrown away, and materials collected for recycling are often contaminated. And they use the opportunities to really move upstream to reduce waste in the first place. And they did this in part through new goals that include waste generation goals to reduce the state's waste generation by 15% below 2012 levels by 2025 and reduce the waste by 40% below 2012 levels by 2050. And in the group I've in, we've adopted those same waste generation goals for the food waste prevention strategy. So they're getting pretty aggressive, and one thing that's interesting at DEQ in Oregon is that the generation goals for waste aren't per capita goals, because while people may care about per capita goals, we're not sure the environment does.
Great. Thank you so much, Ashley. And I think this kind of gets at the question of buy-in or how to overcome opposition from management. It's, all the organizations here definitely had these sort of goals in their plans to work towards. So that's how it was that they were able to work with their decision makers. So I encourage you to look at King County, for example, their climate action or their climate-based emissions inventory. That kind of broke out the pie chart that that Karen had, and then also with the other organizations, they would have something as well. So we are approaching the last minute here, and I want to thank again all of our speakers. I'm sorry we can't get to all the questions, but in order to end us on time, we'll go ahead and close. And thank you all for everyone for your inspiring work in utilizing food to get to waste. We want to thank all of our partners who also helped develop the toolkit, as well as those others who have implemented food to get to waste in their communities. And finally, most of all, we want to thank you for joining us this month in the SMM Web Academy, and hope you continue to join us in future webinars. It is you that this program is designed for, so please do make sure that you complete our webinar evaluation and give us feedback on how we can meet your needs. We'll post the webinar audio in about 2 weeks and the slides next week online. And please do join us for next month's webinar in October titled New Toolkit, Reforming Laws and Policies to Enhance Food Recovery at the State and Local Level. Thank you very much. This concludes today's session. And this ends the webinar.